Before flight instruction begins, you must know the operating procedures of the T2j airplane. The purpose of this film is to show normal ground procedures and flight procedures. First, ground procedures. Although detailed procedures for the exterior ground inspection appear in the flight handbook, here are some special checkpoints to be considered. Beginning forward on the port side of the fuselage, glance up at the canopy air bottle gauge. Proper pressure will be indicated if the gauge needle points in the green band on the dial. Now open the oil and fuel filler door and check that the oil level is just above the screen. Then check that the hydraulic power system level gauge reads full. As you move forward, check the static pressure vent to make sure it is unclogged. Make sure the baggage compartment latches are secure. Inspect the nose wheel strut assembly for hydraulic leaks or tire wear. Inspect the intake ducts for structural integrity and absence of foreign matter. Inspect the pitot tube for obstructions or damage. Moving around the nose, check for fuselage damage. Before leaving the forward fuselage area, make sure the starboard equipment bay door is secure. Then continue with a check of the starboard wing. Visually inspect the surfaces for structural integrity or evidence of buckling. Before reaching the wing tip, stop and look back at the wheel brake hydraulic level gauge, which should now be in view. The gauge is located aft and to the starboard side of the front seat. It should read full. Check the tip tank sight gauge. If the tank is full, the ping pong ball will be at the top of the sight gauge. Next, check the aileron for free travel, the flaps for damage. Also check for any hydraulic leakage in the wing area. Then check the main landing gear. Visually check the area for hydraulic leakage, the tires for unusual wear or cuts. Check the brake discs for scoring and the pucks for wear. Now check the aft fuselage. Then look over the tailpipe for damage. Inspect the turbine section for foreign objects or damage to the turbine blades. After inspecting the tailpipe area, give the tail surfaces a sharp visual check. Then inspect the port side items as you inspected those on the starboard side. If you plan to fly solo, be sure to check the following items in the rear cockpit before you climb into the front seat. Make sure the red seat cover is in place, and the 3 safety pins and canopy release pin for the seat ejection system are secure. Next, check the emergency electrical disconnect switch in the normal position, and the oxygen valve off. This completes your aft cockpit check. Now climb aboard and get yourself squared away. Position your oxygen mask and turn the oxygen valve to on. Check for a white indication in the pilot's release aneroid gauge. Have the plane captain remove the 3 seat safety pins and the pin and streamer from the canopy emergency release handle. Before starting the engine, perform the pre-start cockpit check. On the left console, check the following items. Fuel shutoff valve, off. Oxygen shutoff valve, on. Radio equipment, off. Tip tank fuel dump handle, in. Tip tank fuel transfer switch, off. Speed brake dump handle, in. Air start ignition switch, off. Power control friction lever, aft. Power control lever, off. Speed brake switch, neutral. Engine master switch, off. Hydraulic boost switch, on. Circuit breakers, in. Landing gear handle, down. On the right console, check the following items. Arresting hook control handle, up. DC power control switch, off. Instrument AC power switch, number 1 inverter. TACAN, off. Now place the DC power control switch in the BAT-GEN position and check the following. Electrical control transfer light, on. Adjust rudder pedals and seat as desired. Voltammeter, 21 volts minimum. Fuel quantity indicator, test. Liquid oxygen quantity indicator, test. After completing the pre-start cockpit check, give the plane captain the plug-in signal for impingement air. And signify that you are ready for start by giving the plane captain a thumbs-up signal. When a minimum of 40 pounds of air is indicated on the starting unit, the plane captain returns the thumbs-up signal. Now begin the starting sequence. Fuel shutoff valve, on. Engine master switch, on. Engine start switch to start and hold momentarily. Watch the tachometer. When the engine RPM reaches 12%, advance the power control lever to the idle detent. As the engine accelerates to idle RPM of 39 plus or minus 1%, the exhaust gas temperature normally will not exceed 850 degrees centigrade and will stabilize at approximately 600 degrees. At idle RPM, check the oil pressure gauge. Minimum oil pressure should be 15 pounds per square inch. Give the plane captain the unplug signal for the removal of impingement air and perform the pre-taxi check. Turn on your radio equipment. Check that the plane captain has removed the 3 landing gear safety pins. Flaps, extend on signal. Speed brakes, open on signal. Takeoff trim, set. Circuit breakers, in. Altimeter, set. Now perform the inverter check. When the inverter switch goes through off, the inverter caution light should flick on momentarily. Be sure the switch is back in number 1 position for flight. Perform the fire warning and caution light check. To do this, place the fire detector and warning light test switch in the forward position. The 2 fire warning lights should come on. Now move the switch to the aft position. The following lights should come on: the command ejection lever light, the landing gear handle light, the wheels warning light, the 6 caution lights on the instrument panel, and the arresting hook control handle light. Yaw damper on. Operate controls to check for freedom of movement while checking the hydraulic gauge for the normal fluctuations in pressure. Flaps retract on signal. Speed brakes retract on signal. Close the canopy as desired. Call for taxi clearance and you're ready to taxi. Hold the brakes and give the plane captain the pull chock signal. Adjust the friction on the power control lever. After the plane captain is clear of the aircraft and gives you the turn up hold signal, advance power to 60% RPM. Release the brakes on signal and allow forward speed to build up for the turn before reducing power to idle. Be cautious of directing jet blast on the line. Control your direction of taxi with smooth braking action, using minimum power necessary to maintain the desired forward speed. Execute wide radius turns, applying power as necessary to maintain taxi speed throughout the turns. Prior to taking the duty runway, stop the aircraft and complete the takeoff checklist. After completing the checkoff list and receiving clearance to take the duty runway, taxi out and align the aircraft straight down the runway. Be sure the nose gear is straight. Hold the brakes and apply power smoothly to 100% RPM. Check exhaust gas temperature, RPM, fuel flow, and oil pressure. When you are ready to roll, release the brakes simultaneously. Maintain directional control by minimum use of light braking action if necessary until the rudder becomes effective at about 40 knots. At 85 knots, assume the takeoff attitude by smoothly applying back stick to raise the nose wheel off the deck. When safely airborne and a positive rate of climb is established, raise the landing gear and retrim the aircraft, maintaining the takeoff attitude. Raise the flaps at 135 knots. Climb to 500 feet, level off, and accelerate to climb schedule. Flight characteristics of the T2j provide good stability and maneuverability for the performance of all normal flight and acrobatic maneuvers. Stall characteristics are good in either the clean or dirty configuration. Your first indication of an approaching stall is actuation of the rudder shaker, followed by moderate airframe buffeting. With the onset of airframe buffeting, the stall occurs. Recover by decreasing the angle of attack, adding power, reducing drag, and leveling off at a comfortable flying speed. If you delay your recovery from a stall, a spin may occur. Recover from the spin by reducing power to idle RPM, centering the stick slightly forward of the neutral position, and applying full opposite rudder. Until the applied recovery corrections become effective, the rate of spin may increase. However, hold controls in recovery position and rotation will stop. The airplane will recover in a nose-down attitude. At this point, neutralize the rudder and ease the stick back in a smooth pull-out to a level attitude. The T2j has no unusual roll characteristics. Now the letdown and landing. During the letdown, speed brakes are used. They may be extended at any airspeed and can be stopped at any point in their travel. However, when the speed brakes are fully extended, a slight nose-up pitch is experienced. If you plan to leave the speed brakes extended, some change in longitudinal trim will be required. Before entering the pattern, dump the fuel remaining in the tip tanks. First, let's look at the overall pattern. Enter the landing pattern at 250 knots. Approach the brake point slightly to the right of the runway in a wings level attitude. When cleared to brake, roll into a 45-degree angle of bank. Extend speed brakes and reduce power. As the airspeed falls below 165 knots, extend the gear and flaps. As you enter the downwind leg, adjust power to maintain 110 knots. Complete the landing checkoff list. With clearance from the tower, begin turning off from the 180-degree position. Reduce power so as to arrive at the 90-degree position at 100 knots, 15 units angle of attack, and 1/2 of the downwind altitude. Continue the approach to arrive on final with 1,200 feet of straightaway to the point of touchdown, 95 knots, and 15 units angle of attack. Maintain attitude and allow the airplane to descend to the runway. Let's repeat the approach and landing. As you roll into the brake, extend the speed brakes and reduce power. Slow to 165 knots, extend the gear and flaps. On the downwind leg, slow to 110 knots. Adjust power and go over the landing checkoff list. Commence turnoff at the 180-degree position. Slow to 100 knots and establish 15 units angle of attack at the 90-degree position. With 1,200 feet of straightaway, continue on final, maintaining 15 units angle of attack until touchdown. If you take a wave off, smoothly apply full power. At the same time, retract the speed brakes and roll into a wings level attitude. Accelerate to a safe climb speed and fly parallel to the duty runway. Traffic permitting, climb to re-enter the downwind leg. Again in the final, your speed is 90 to 95 knots with 15 units angle of attack and about 1,200 feet of straightaway. Hold your speed and attitude and let the airplane descend to the deck. Touch down between 90 and 95 knots and reduce power to idle. Utilize aerodynamic braking by holding the nose wheel off the runway. Allow the nose wheel to touch down at about 65 knots. Use rudder to maintain directional control until speed slows to about 40 knots. Then use the brakes as necessary. Slow the aircraft to normal taxi speed. When clear of the runway, retract the speed brakes and open the canopy as desired. Return to the line. When the aircraft has come to a stop, raise the canopy. The plane captain will chock the wheels and install the 3 landing gear safety pins. When you receive the cut signal from the plane captain, retard the power control lever to off. Turn the engine master switch and the DC power control switch to off. Turn off all electronic equipment. Remove your oxygen mask and turn off the oxygen shutoff valve. Turn off the fuel shutoff valve at 0 RPM. In this film, you have seen normal ground and flight procedures for the T2j Buckeye. Squadron doctrine may vary on some of these procedures. These variations will be pointed out in related lectures by your flight instructor.